Hello everybody. Today we'll be talking about the use keyword, pub use, some nice tricks that you can have with use, the as keyword, using external crates, and separating your program modules into different files. So let's get into it. Alright, so to get started, I just commented out all that we had from the previous video. I'm not doing any background magic or anything, it's just commented out, so you'll still be able to see all of this on GitHub. I just did it so that it's cleaner and we can understand the features that we actually want to understand easier. Okay, so what I want to show you right now is how to, ironically, use the keyword use. Okay, so to exemplify this, I will bring hosting into scope with use. To do that, I say front of house hosting, and this is the same syntax that we're using in the previous video per path, so you'll recognize it. Equally, I could say crate, or I could just relative path to front of house. So what this is doing is it's, as I mentioned previously, bringing hosting scope into eat restaurant scope. So what I can do is I can now say hosting, add to waitlist, and you see that we don't get any errors because add to waitlist is in scope. So ignore when I was actually testing this out. And now let's cargo check. You see that it compiles just fine. Now something else that I want to show you is if we want to bring two things that have the same name into scope. And just to show that, I'll call this front of house 2, and I'll call this hosting 2, and I'll keep this function as still add to waitlist. Now, if I wanted to, instead of using hosting, just bring add to waitlist, here I would say add to waitlist. I could then use this function here just fine. But suppose that I wanted to bring the add to waitlist from front of house 2. How would we do this? Even though they have different paths, I can't just say hosting 2 add to waitlist, because then you see that these two statements are the same. Am I calling this or am I calling this? Right? The same name confuses Rust, and so we would, in this case, have to bring hosting 2, and then say hosting 2. Okay, so there isn't much to use. I mean, you'll be using it everywhere in your code, but there's not really much that I can go beyond this. And now we'll talk about the as keyword. Alright, now continuing from our previous example, suppose that I really wanted to bring add to waitlist instead of hosting. Okay, so I don't want to say hosting 2, I don't want to have any double colons in my actual function. Okay, so what I could do is use the as keyword. The way you use that is right here where you have your error. You could then rename how you would use this function. So in this case, we can just say add to waitlist 2, and this would allow us to come here in the code and then call this function as add to waitlist 2. Okay, and I mean, of course, in this example, it doesn't make any sense. I could just go here and I could say 2, but most of the time when you're using an external crate and you're not seeing this code because it's in a different file, then this could come in handy quite a lot. Right now we'll talk about pub use. Alright, another important thing to note about use is that every use import is private by default. So if I were to create a new public module called hosting chaos, and I were to use, let's start from the crate, then go to front of house 2, hosting 2. If I try to access the add to waitlist using this path, so doing something like hosting chaos, hosting 2, add to waitlist, you note that it will give us an error saying that hosting 2 is private, and that's because, as I mentioned, they are private by default. Instead, if I did pub use crate, you see that this error vanishes and it compiles just fine. Another quick thing that I wanted to mention is using external crates in your project. You can go to this website called crates.io, and you can find a bunch of code written by the Rust community that you can import into your projects and use. If you're following along with the book and you've done Chapter 2's project, you'll recognize that we use this rand crate. So it's just a Rust library for random number generation, and it tells you right here how you would use it. So what you would do is you would go into your cargo toml file, so go right here, cargo toml, and in dependencies, you would add rand, and you can say whatever version you like. Here they're saying 7.2. And then you can cargo build. Okay, so you see that it finished. It compiled a bunch of things from the rand library. You can see that we now have a bunch of random number stuff. And yeah, that's how you use external crates. Right now I just want to show you a couple of neat tricks that we can do with use, and just so I don't show you a bunch of useless stuff, I'll comment this out and I'll push it down again. So right here, what I want to do is I want to use nested paths to clean up large use lists. So suppose I'm using stdio, and I'm also using std compare ordering. Okay, this, as you can probably tell, this can get really huge. I can start using std, fmt, and so forth. So what Rust allows us to do, something super nice, is it allows us to create these little compact lists of what we want to import. The way we do that is we open curly brackets after the double colons. We can say compare ordering, comma, IO. And this is equivalent to what we had previously. Use std cmp ordering and use std IO. Okay, so it's equivalent. Okay. All right, now let's comment this out. And suppose I wanted to push that down again. Suppose that I wanted to import something like std IO and std IO write. Now something else that's super neat that Rust allows us to do is we can say use std IO, and inside of our list we can refer to self, meaning just import IO, and then write. Okay. And now the last little trick you can use is the glob operator. What the glob operator allows us to do is import everything on a certain library. So suppose you want to say standard collections, you can then say star, and the star is this glob operator, and it will allow us to import everything from collections. Okay, so that's about it. Now let's talk about splitting your code into different files. All right, so this last thing that we're talking about, I think was definitely the coolest thing in the chapter. Once again, I just pushed down the code and commented it out so we can start fresh. And I want to start with creating what we had previously. So I want to create mod front of house. That's my module. Then I want to create a pub mod hosting. And then I want to create a function called add to waitlist. I know as of now you've seen this 10,000 times, but just bear with me. And right here I want to have my function eat at restaurant. Okay. And in eat at restaurant let's use front of house, or rather create front of house hosting. And then instead of eat a restaurant, we will just do hosting and to waitlist. Okay, so pretty much what we had previously. Great. Now, what I want to do is I want to extract this and put it on a different file. The way that Rust allows us to do this is by simply, I'll remove this, and instead I'll say mod front of house semicolon. Now what this is telling Rust is that it should go look for a file in source called front of house.rs. So if I do cargo check, oh, we have all the random stuff, hey? But regardless, you'll see that name the file either front of house or front of house mod.rs inside the source directory. Couldn't find it, so let's go create it. Let's fix this error. So instead of source, we'll go and we'll create front of house.rs. Just go to our cargo toml file. We'll remove that. Now we should be able to check quicker. And you'll see that we have no hosting because we haven't defined it in rs. So let's just copy this guy. Let's put it here. Let's uncomment this. And oh my god. And now we can run it. And oh, add to waitlist is private. Let's just make it public. And now it should just work. It should work just fine, which it does. Okay. But now say that I really want to remove hosting as well. How am I going to do that? Similarly, I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to say pub mod hosting. But instead, this time, as hosting is a child of front of house, what I'm going to do is in source, I'm going to create a new folder called front of house. And in this folder, I'm going to create our hosting.rs. Okay. Now in our hosting.rs, I'm going to create our usual pub function, add to waitlist. Okay. Which doesn't do anything. Now if I cargo check, see, it compiles just fine. So in comparison to having this, now in our create root lib.rs, we specify, we tell Rust that we're going to have this file in source. We use it, so we bring it to scope to allow us to use hosting add to waitlist. We have this front of house.rs file, which just tells us that we're going to have a module called hosting, which tells Rust that we're looking for something called front of house, a folder called front of house in source that has a hosting.rs file in it. And inside of this folder, we have our hosting.rs, which just has our function. And I think this will be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.